My name is Emily Harper, a 29-year-old former kindergarten teacher from Boston. I never imagined that at 9 months pregnant, with swollen ankles and an aching back, I would be standing on a crowded bus while my husband, Daniel Ascendancy. His loyalty seemed admirable then, but I didn't see how this dynamic would undermine our relationship. As our relationship progressed, David began subtly criticizing my choices. My teaching career was sweet, but not ambitious enough. My apartment was charming, but in need of a man's touch. My friends were a bit immature. Each comment eroded my confidence, positioning David as the more sensible one in our relationship. After 6 months of dating, David proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. The ring was beautiful, but not my style, something Margaret later mentioned she helped select. Still, I was swept away by the romance and said yes without hesitation. My parents expressed happiness but suggested a longer engagement to ensure compatibility. I dismissed their caution as overprotectiveness. Our wedding 8 months later was beautiful, with white roses and string lights transforming a historic Boston venue. Margaret insisted on handling many details, often overriding my preferences with comments like, "David would prefer this," or "This is how a proper wedding should be." I compromised to keep peace, believing marriage would establish new boundaries. During our vows, David promised to cherish and respect me forever. Yet, at the reception, I overheard him telling Margaret, "Don't worry, Mom. Nothing will change between us." The comment bothered me, but I pushed concerns aside, attributing them to wedding day nerves. The changes after marriage were gradual. David suggested I stop teaching to focus on creating our home. When I resisted, he emphasized the financial sense of living on his larger salary. Margaret began visiting every weekend, often staying from Friday through Monday. She rearranged our furniture, criticized my cooking, and reminisced about David's ex-girlfriends who were such wonderful cooks. 2 years into our marriage, conversations about starting a family became frequent. I was excited about becoming a mother, but wanted healthier boundaries with Margaret first. David dismissed my concerns. "Once we have children, you'll appreciate having Mom around to help." After some hesitation, David suddenly became enthusiastic about having a baby. I now suspect Margaret was the catalyst, as she began talking about wanting grandchildren during her visits. While I became pregnant 3 months later, both David and Margaret reacted with overwhelming excitement that quickly turned into constant supervision of my every move. The day I discovered I was pregnant remains bittersweet. After missing my period and feeling unusually tired, I took a test while David was at work. Those 2 pink lines filled me with wonder and nervous excitement. I prepared a special dinner and wrapped the test in a small box with baby booties I'd impulsively purchased. When David opened it, his expression cycled through surprise, uncertainty, and finally a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "We're going to be parents," he said, hugging me. Within minutes, he was calling Margaret. "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother," he announced, putting her on speakerphone. Her squeal of delight was immediate. "I'll be there tomorrow to help plan everything," Margaret declared. Before I could object, David had agreed, and plans were set in motion without my input. Margaret arrived the next day with stacks of pregnancy books, lists of acceptable foods, and strong opinions about everything from prenatal vitamins to baby names. "Emily needs to understand this isn't just about her anymore," she told David while I sat across from them, feeling like an incubator rather than an expectant mother. My first prenatal appointment should have been intimate for David and me. Instead, Margaret insisted on joining us, answering questions directed at me and presenting a list of concerns she'd researched. "Emily has been drinking coffee. Is that going to harm the baby?" she asked Dr. Carter, who looked uncomfortably between us. "1 small cup a day is generally safe," the doctor explained, addressing me directly. Before I could respond, David interjected, "We'll eliminate all caffeine just to be safe, won't we, honey?" His hand squeezed mine in a way that looked affectionate but felt like a warning. This pattern continued through every appointment. When we learned we were having a girl, Margaret vetoed my name suggestions in favor of family names from her side. David supported her. "Mom has great taste in names." After all, she named me. By my 4th month, Margaret had temporarily moved into our guest room to help with the pregnancy. What was supposed to be a weekend visit extended indefinitely. She took over decorating the nursery, choosing a pink and gray theme I disliked but was too exhausted to fight. She rearranged our kitchen cabinets for her special pregnancy teas and supplements she insisted I take. "You're doing it wrong," became her constant refrain, whether I was folding baby clothes or preparing a meal. David always sided with her. Mom raised me successfully, so maybe listen to her advice, dismissing my feelings as pregnancy hormones. As my belly grew, my world shrank. David made excuses to cancel my plans with friends. "Sophie sounds like she has a cold. You can't risk getting sick, or your parents can visit after the baby comes. They'll just stress you out now." He installed a home security system that notified him whenever doors opened, claiming it was for my safety. He began checking my phone regularly, reading messages under the guise of sharing everything as spouses should. Calls with my parents were on speakerphone, with David or Margaret always present. My best friend, Chloe, tried to visit once, bringing baby gifts. Margaret intercepted her at the door, claiming I was resting and couldn't be disturbed. I learned about this days later through Chloe's text. "Hope you're feeling better. Your mother-in-law seemed very protective of your rest time." Financial control tightened alongside social isolation. David suggested combining our bank accounts for simplicity, then insisted on approving all purchases. My maternity clothes were too expensive, yet Margaret received a new iPad to research baby information without discussion. When I needed shoes for my swelling feet, I had to justify the expense repeatedly. Meanwhile, Margaret ordered an elaborate crib bedding set costing 3 times as much, which David approved instantly. "It's not just about money," David explained when I questioned this. "It's about priorities. Mom understands what the baby really needs." By my 7th month, I needed permission for basic purchases and had to account for my whereabouts constantly. If I took too long at the grocery store, I'd return to multiple missed calls and David waiting in the driveway, claiming concern. At my 30-week checkup, my blood pressure had risen significantly, and Dr. Carter noted my weight gain had slowed despite being in the 3rd trimester. "Are you experiencing unusual stress at home, Emily?" she asked during a rare moment when Margaret stepped out for a call. Before I could answer honestly, David returned and spoke for me. "We're just excited about the baby. Everything's fine at home, right, honey?" The look in his eyes left no room for contradiction. I nodded silently as Dr. Carter prescribed rest and stress reduction, looking unconvinced by my forced agreement. That night, I cried silently in the bathroom, the only place I could find privacy. My daughter kicked inside me, and I promised her things would be different. The morning of the bus incident began like any other day in my 3rd trimester. I woke exhausted after another night of interrupted sleep, my 9-month pregnant body struggling to find comfort. David had scheduled another appointment with Dr. Carter to check my blood pressure, which remained concerningly high. "Margaret will meet us at the clinic," David announced over breakfast, scraping burnt edges off toast he'd made without my asking. "I thought this was just a quick checkup," I said carefully. "Is it necessary for her to come?" David's jaw tightened. "Mama's concerned about you and the baby. She has every right to be there." The appointment was tense. My blood pressure was higher than ever, and Dr. Carter suggested discussing possible early induction. Before I could process this, Margaret interjected with questions about natural birth versus cesarean, speaking as if I weren't there. "Emily wants a natural birth," David stated confidently, though we'd never discussed my preferences. After the appointment, David announced we'd take the bus home instead of a rideshare. "The walk to the bus stop will be good for your blood pressure," he insisted, despite Dr. Carter's rest recommendation. The bus was crowded, filled with afternoon commuters. I stood awkwardly at the entrance, one hand supporting my lower back, the other clutching the handrail. An elderly man noticed my condition and offered a seat. I thanked him gratefully, lowering my swollen body onto the hard plastic. David and Margaret remained standing as the bus lurched forward. Margaret sighed loudly, shifting her weight. "These young people have no respect," she muttered, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "No one offers a seat to a woman my age anymore." A middle-aged woman glanced up from her book, then returned to reading. Other seated passengers became engrossed in their phones or the scenery. 10 minutes into the ride, at a crowded stop, more passengers boarded. Margaret was jostled slightly by a teenager with headphones. That's when it happened. David's face flushed deep red. He lunged toward me, grabbing my upper arm with enough force to leave fingerprint bruises. "Why are you sitting?" "My mom's standing," he shouted, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent bus. "Give up your seat now." The pain from his grip stunned me, but the public humiliation was worse. Dozens of strangers watched as my husband towered over me, his fingers digging into my flesh, his face contorted with rage. Margaret stood behind him, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. "I'm 9 months pregnant," I whispered, tears welling in my eyes. "I don't care," David hissed, pulling at my arm. "Get up. Mom needs to sit down." The bus went silent. A woman with a toddler pulled her child closer. The bus driver watched through the rearview mirror, his hand hovering near the radio. Time seemed suspended in that horrible moment. Then, from 3 rows back, an elderly woman with silver hair and piercing blue eyes stood up. She was small, but commanded the space with her presence. "Take your hands off her right now," she said, her voice calm, but carrying unmistakable authority. "What kind of man treats his pregnant wife this way?" David released my arm as if burned, turning to face this challenger. "This is between me and my wife," he said, his voice lower but still aggressive. "My mother needs a seat." The woman, who I'd later know as Clara, moved forward until she stood directly in front of David. Despite being nearly a foot shorter, she showed no fear. "There are 2 people sitting in that seat," Clara said, pointing to my pregnant belly, "and neither one should stand for someone perfectly capable of standing themselves." She turned to Margaret. "Shame on you for allowing your son to treat his wife and your grandchild this way." The bus erupted in murmurs of agreement. A man in a business suit stood. "I'm happy to give my seat to the older lady if it's really necessary," he offered, though his tone suggested skepticism about Margaret's need. David's strategy shifted. His public persona, the charming hospital administrator, reasserted itself. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said with a forced laugh. "My wife hasn't been feeling well, and I'm concerned about her and the baby. Mom and I are just trying to take care of her." Margaret quickly adopted a concerned expression. "We've just come from the doctor. Her blood pressure is very high. Sometimes she doesn't make the best decisions in this condition." Their attempt to reframe the situation might have worked had Clara not witnessed everything. "That's not what I saw," she stated firmly. "You grabbed her. You yelled at her. You tried to force a heavily pregnant woman to stand on a moving bus." Other passengers voiced agreement. "I saw him grab her arm," said a college student near the front. "He was hurting her," added a woman in scrubs. "I'm a nurse. That's not how you show concern." The bus driver pulled over and walked back toward us. "Is there a problem here? Do I need to call someone?" he asked, looking directly at me. In that moment, with strangers defending me when my own husband wouldn't, something broke and reformed inside me. All the compromises, the erosion of my independence, the isolation, the financial control, the criticism disguised as care, the constant supervision, it all crystallized into clarity. This wasn't love. This was abuse. I looked at David and saw not the charming man I'd married, but someone who had systematically dismantled my confidence and autonomy. I looked at Margaret and recognized her as an architect of my captivity. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "There's a problem. I don't want to go home with them." David's expression darkened. "Don't be ridiculous, Emily. You're upset and hormonal. We're going home to rest, and everything will be fine." Margaret added, "This is exactly why you need us. You're not thinking clearly." Clara stepped between us. She said she doesn't want to go with you. That's her choice to make. The bus driver nodded. "Ma'am, do you feel safe going home with your husband?" The question hung in the air. For 3 years, I'd convinced myself David's behavior was normal, that his control was protection, that his criticism was guidance. Now, surrounded by strangers who recognized what I failed to see, I couldn't maintain the illusion. "No," I whispered, then louder, "No, I don't." "This is absurd," David sputtered. "She's my wife. She's carrying my child. She's a person making her own decision, Clara countered, and I'm offering her an alternative place to stay tonight. I looked at this stranger risking herself to help me and felt more trust than I had in my own home for months. Without another word, I stood, walked past David and Margaret, and followed Clara toward the exit. You'll regret this, David called after me. You have nowhere to go. You have no money. You need us. I kept walking, one hand protectively over my belly, the other clutching the business card Clara had pressed in my palm. Behind us, the bus driver told David to calm down or he'd call the police. As we stepped off the bus into the afternoon sunlight, I took my first free breath in years. The first few hours after leaving the bus were a blur of adrenaline and fear. Clara guided me to a small cafe 2 blocks away, her steady hand on my elbow providing more genuine support than I'd felt in months. You're shaking, she observed quietly, ordering me chamomile tea. Once seated in a corner booth, Clara introduced herself properly. I'm Clara Bennett. I was a domestic violence counselor for 30 years before retiring. I still volunteer at the women's shelter downtown. Her explanation of how she recognized the signs made sense. The way he grabbed you, the public humiliation, the attempt to make you seem irrational when challenged, the financial threats as you left. These are textbook abuser tactics, she explained. I sat in stunned silence, the word abuser echoing in my mind. That wasn't a term I'd associated with David, the respected hospital administrator who charmed everyone. Yet Clara had identified in minutes what I'd failed to see for years. Where can I take you? Clara asked gently. Parents? Friends? I shook my head, tears welling. David isolated me from everyone. My parents live in New Hampshire now, and we haven't spoken regularly in months. My friends, I don't even know if they'd still consider me friends. Clara nodded, understanding. Then you'll come home with me tonight. Tomorrow, we can connect you with resources and make a longer-term plan. My phone buzzed constantly since we left the bus. 23 missed calls from David, 11 from Margaret, and dozens of increasingly threatening texts. You're being ridiculous. Come home now. Think about the baby, Emily. You're putting our child at risk. Your parents won't take you in. I already called them. Without me, you have nothing. Remember that. Clara suggested turning off my phone, and I did, feeling both terror and relief as the screen went black. Clara's apartment was small but immaculately kept, with bookshelves lining every wall and a ginger cat named Sunny, who inspected me with cautious curiosity. The guest room is through there, she said, pointing to a narrow hallway. It's not much, but it's safe. The room was simple, a twin bed with a patchwork quilt and a small dresser. But there were no criticisms of my movements, no questioning of my decisions, no Margaret rearranging my belongings. For the first time in months, I could exhale fully. When was the last time you ate? Clara asked, heading to her kitchen. I realized I hadn't eaten since a small breakfast. Clara prepared scrambled eggs and toast, watching with grandmotherly satisfaction as I devoured 2 helpings. That night, I slept deeply despite my enormous belly and the unfamiliar surroundings. No one burst in to check if I was sleeping correctly for the baby. No one monitored my bathroom trips or water intake. The silence was healing. Morning brought renewed anxiety as Clara helped me turn my phone back on. The barrage of messages had continued through the night, evolving from anger to manipulation. I've been driving all night looking for you. The doctor called. Your condition is dangerous for the baby. If you care about our child, you'll come home now. I've contacted a lawyer. You can't keep my child from me. Most disturbing were messages David sent to mutual acquaintances, painting me as mentally unstable due to pregnancy complications. He's trying to control the narrative, Clara explained. Abusers often isolate victims by turning others against them. With Clara's guidance, I sent a single text to David. I am safe. I need space. Please don't contact me. Then we blocked his and Margaret's numbers. Clara's first call that morning was to Sophie Miller, a domestic violence advocate she'd worked with. Sophie arrived within the hour, bringing prenatal vitamins, maternity clothes, and a wealth of information. First priority is your safety and the baby's health, Sophie stated efficiently. Then we'll work on a legal protection order, emergency housing, and reconnecting you with your support system. She explained resources available through the women's shelter, including legal advocates who understood the complexities of leaving an abusive relationship while pregnant. Massachusetts has strong laws protecting domestic violence survivors, including pregnant women, she assured me. Sophie arranged for me to see Dr. Laura Hayes, an obstetrician affiliated with the shelter, that afternoon. In a small, welcoming office, Dr. Hayes conducted a thorough examination. Your blood pressure is still elevated, but better than your records from yesterday indicate, she noted. The baby's heartbeat is strong, and your cervix isn't showing signs of early labor. That's all positive. Unlike appointments with David and Margaret present, Dr. Hayes spoke directly to me, explained every test, and asked for my consent before each procedure. She listened to my birth preferences without judgment and helped me create a flexible birth plan. Stress reduction is my primary prescription for you right now, she said firmly. And that means keeping yourself away from your stressors. That evening, with Clara's encouragement, I made the most difficult call of my life. My parents had left 3 voicemails, confused by David's version of events. "Mom," I said when she answered, my voice breaking. "I need help." The story poured out. 3 years of gradual control and manipulation, culminating in the bus incident. My mother listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "We're coming to Boston tomorrow," she said when I finished, her nurse's voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. "Your father is already packing the car. David said he called you." I ventured hesitantly. "He did," Mom confirmed. "He said you were having pregnancy complications affecting your mental state, that you'd run off with a stranger, and he was worried about your safety." Her voice hardened. I knew something wasn't right. "You've never been irrational, pregnant or not." The relief of being believed, of not having to defend my sanity, brought fresh tears. "We'll be there by noon tomorrow," Mom promised. "And Emily, I'm so sorry we didn't see what was happening sooner." That night, as Clara and I shared tea in her living room, she asked, "What do you want to happen now?" The future loomed, uncertain and frightening. I placed both hands on my belly, feeling my daughter's reassuring kicks. "I want to be safe," I said slowly. "I want my daughter to grow up, seeing her mother treated with respect. I want to rebuild my life without fear." Clara nodded. "Then that's where we'll start." The process of obtaining an emergency protective order was both empowering and terrifying. 2 days after leaving David, I sat in a courthouse with Sophie, the advocate, and Julia Reed, a pro bono attorney from the Women's Legal Aid Society. "The restraining order will prohibit David from contacting you directly or through others," Julia explained. "It will also establish temporary custody of the baby once she's born." The paperwork required me to detail the abuse in clinical terms. The bus incident, the financial control, the isolation, the monitoring, the criticism disguised as concern. When written down, the pattern was undeniable. "Will the judge believe me?" I asked. The fingerprints on my arm had faded to yellowing smudges. "Abuse isn't just physical," Julia assured me. "Massachusetts courts recognize emotional and financial abuse as domestic violence." The emergency hearing was granted that afternoon. Walking into the courtroom, I froze momentarily, seeing David and Margaret seated with their attorney, a polished woman in an expensive suit. David shed his aggressive demeanor for a concerned husband facade, complete with dark circles under his eyes, suggesting sleepless worry. Julia squeezed my hand. "Remember, the judge sees these tactics every day." When called to testify, I recounted the bus incident in detail, my voice gaining strength. The judge, a stern woman with reading glasses, asked direct questions about the pattern of control. David's attorney attempted to paint me as emotionally unstable due to pregnancy, suggesting I'd misinterpreted caring actions. "Mrs. Harper has a history of anxiety," she claimed. Her husband and mother-in-law were simply ensuring a healthy pregnancy. Margaret testified next, presenting herself as a concerned grandmother-to-be who'd sacrificed everything to help. "Emily has been increasingly paranoid," she stated. "We've been walking on eggshells around her mood swings." When David took the stand, he portrayed himself as a devoted husband blindsided by my irrational behavior. "I've given Emily everything," he insisted, his voice catching theatrically. "I only want her and our baby to come home where they belong." Julia dismantled this narrative during cross-examination, highlighting the financial control, isolation, and surveillance. She presented printouts of threatening texts David sent after I left. "Are these the messages of a concerned husband?" she asked. "Or someone angry about losing control?" The judge reviewed the evidence silently, her expression unreadable. After what seemed like hours, she granted the emergency protective order. "Based on the evidence, I find reasonable cause to believe Ms. Harper is in immediate danger of abuse," she stated. "The order will remain in effect until the full hearing next month." David's face darkened momentarily before he reassumed his concerned expression. As we left, I heard him tell his attorney, "She'll come back. She has nowhere else to go." He underestimated the support network forming around me. Clara continued providing safe housing. My parents arrived from New Hampshire, renting a small apartment nearby to stay indefinitely. Former colleagues from teaching reached out after hearing rumors, offering maternity clothes and job leads. Most surprisingly, Chloe appeared at Clara's door with groceries and an apology. "I should have tried harder to stay in touch," she said, hugging me awkwardly around my belly. I knew something wasn't right. David wasn't idle, initiating a counter-narrative through mutual acquaintances and social media, portraying himself as a devoted husband whose unstable wife had been manipulated by radical feminists at a shelter. Margaret contacted my extended family, claiming I joined a cult-like group that turned women against their families. Some believed them, others recognized abuser tactics and offered support. My former principal called. "The David they're describing doesn't match the Emily I know. How can I help?" 3 weeks after leaving David, during a preliminary hearing for the permanent restraining order, I felt the first contraction. I tried to ignore it, focusing on Julia's questioning of David's financial records, which showed his control of my earnings and assets. A second, stronger contraction hit 10 minutes later. I clutched my mother's hand. "I think I'm in labor," I whispered. The judge, noticing my distress, called a recess. In the courthouse bathroom, my water broke in a dramatic gush, soaking my maternity dress and the floor. "Your Honor, my client needs to be transported to the hospital immediately," Julia announced. "She's in active labor." David stood. "That's my child. I have a right to be there." The judge held up her hand. "The emergency order remains in effect, Mr. Harper. You're not to approach Ms. Harper at the hospital or anywhere else." Julia had coordinated with hospital security, anticipating this. As my parents rushed me to Massachusetts General Hospital, Sophie called ahead to activate the safety protocol for domestic violence survivors. Labor progressed rapidly, my body perhaps eager to release the stress of recent weeks. The delivery room became my sanctuary, with my mother on one side and Claire on the other. Dr. Laura calmly guided me through each contraction, respecting my birth preferences while ensuring safety. "You're doing beautifully, Emily," she encouraged as I entered the transition phase. "Your daughter is almost here." After 4 hours of labor, with one final push, my daughter entered the world with a powerful cry. Dr. Laura placed her on my chest, her tiny body warm and wriggling. "Hello, Ava," I whispered, the name I'd chosen independently without David or Margaret's input. "We're going to be okay." Hospital staff, briefed about my situation, posted security discreetly near my room. Their presence proved necessary when, 6 hours after Ava's birth, David attempted to enter the maternity ward. "I'm here to see my daughter," he told the nurse, his voice carrying down the hallway. "I'm sorry, sir, but there's a protective order in place," the charge nurse responded firmly. "You'll need to leave immediately." David's voice rose. "That's my child in there. You can't keep me from seeing my own child." Security arrived, escorting him out as he protested. Margaret tried an hour later, bringing flowers and claiming to be on the approved visitor list. She was turned away. "You don't understand," I heard her argue. "I'm the grandmother. I have rights too." The security guard responded professionally. "Ma'am, the only rights that matter now are the mother's right to safety and the child's right to protection. Please leave before we involve the police. In the quiet aftermath, holding Ava as she slept peacefully, I felt profound joy and lingering fear. David had made it clear he wouldn't relinquish control easily. The journey ahead would be challenging, but looking at my daughter's perfect face, I knew I'd made the right decision. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The first weeks of motherhood were a bittersweet blend of joy and healing. Ava was a calm baby, with a full head of dark hair and curious blue eyes that took in everything. My parents and Clara created a protective circle, allowing me to focus on bonding with Ava and recovering from birth. Every diaper change, feeding, and tiny milestone belonged to us alone, without Margaret's criticism or David's control. When Ava first smiled at 3 weeks old, I wept with the joy of experiencing it without someone diminishing the moment. She's smiling at me, not gas. I told my mother, who understood why this mattered. Of course she is, Mom affirmed. She knows exactly who her mother is. These validations helped rebuild my confidence, dismantled during my marriage. The legal battles continued. Julia filed for divorce on grounds of cruel and abusive treatment, along with a petition for primary custody of Ava. David countered aggressively, seeking joint physical custody and challenging the abuse allegations. He's claiming the bus incident was an isolated event caused by concern for his mother, Julia explained, and that your actions demonstrate parental alienation. David hired Nathan Brooks, a high-profile divorce attorney known for contentious custody battles. His strategy was clear during depositions, portraying me as mentally unstable and financially incapable. How do you plan to support your daughter without employment or savings? Nathan questioned, his tone suggesting the answer was obvious. I'm recertifying my teaching license, I replied steadily, and I have family support while I establish independence. Margaret's involvement complicated matters, filing a petition for grandparent visitation rights, claiming a significant relationship with Ava despite never meeting her. Massachusetts law doesn't favor grandparent rights over parental objections without exceptional circumstances, Julia assured me. But we need to address it formally. The courtroom became a battlefield. David and Margaret brought character witnesses describing David as devoted and generous, suggesting I'd been erratic during pregnancy. Our side countered with Dr. Laura's testimony about the physical impacts of emotional abuse, statements from bus passengers, and documentation of financial control. Clara's testimony was powerful. As a retired domestic violence counselor, she provided context. What I witnessed on that bus wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of an established pattern of abuse. While this unfolded, I focused on creating a home for Ava and myself. With my parents' help, I found a small 2-bedroom apartment in a secure building with 24-hour desk coverage. The property management worked with domestic violence survivors, understanding confidentiality and security. Moving in with few belongings was both liberating and daunting. We'll build it piece by piece, my father reassured me, arriving with a refurbished secondhand crib. Friends from teaching organized a belated baby shower, bringing essentials and decorations. Chloe helped paint the nursery a soft green, stenciling woodland animals on one wall. This is so much better than that pink monstrosity Margaret was creating, she commented. Security remained a concern. David had been caught driving by Clara's apartment and once tried to follow my mother when she was out with Ava. The building's security features, limited access, and cameras provided peace of mind, but I still checked the peephole twice before opening the door. Financial independence became my next priority. With Ava napping in a bassinet beside my desk, I completed online courses to renew my teaching certification. The process rekindled my passion for education, devalued by David during our marriage. Instead of returning to classroom teaching, I accepted a position developing online curriculum for a virtual education company. The role let me work from home while caring for Ava, building my resume and stability. My first independent paycheck brought tears of pride. The amount was modest compared to our household income with David, but every dollar represented freedom. Therapy was essential to recovery. Through weekly sessions with Dr. Martinez, a therapist specializing in domestic abuse, I recognized how David had normalized controlling behavior. Abuse escalates incrementally, so each new boundary crossed doesn't seem worse than the last, Dr. Martinez explained. It's like a frog in slowly heating water, unaware of the danger until it's too late. We worked through guilt for not leaving sooner, shame for missing warning signs, and fear that surfaced unexpectedly. Group therapy with other survivors brought validation and strength. I used to believe I was alone in not recognizing abuse disguised as care, I told the group. Now I understand how common these patterns are. 6 months after leaving David, the court granted me primary physical custody, with David receiving limited supervised visitation once Ava turned 1. Margaret's petition for grandparent rights was denied due to her enabling role in the abuse. The financial settlement included child support and a portion of marital assets, though David concealed some funds. The divorce was granted on grounds of cruel and abusive treatment, validating my experience in court records. When Julia called with the news, I sat on my small balcony, watching the sunset, Ava sleeping indoors. The relief was a quiet unfolding of tension I'd carried for months. It's official, I told my sleeping daughter. We're free to build our own story now. David's final attempt at control came via a carefully worded email after the decision. This isn't over. A piece of paper doesn't change that she's my daughter, too. Instead of responding, I forwarded it to Julia and blocked his email. His threats no longer held power. 3 years have passed since that bus incident. Ava recently celebrated her 3rd birthday with a small party in our garden apartment, surrounded by friends who've become family. Watching her blow out candles, her dark curls bouncing with excitement, I barely recognized the fearful woman I was. Ava has grown into a confident, curious girl who loves dinosaurs and ballet equally. Her bedroom walls feature tutus and Tyrannosaurus Rex posters, her choices unhindered by gender expectations or control. She speaks in full sentences, often surprising me with observations. "Mommy's strong," she declared recently, watching me assemble a bookshelf alone. The phrase held more validation than any compliment for my marriage. Our modest 3-bedroom house in a family-friendly neighborhood offers Ava a backyard for exploration and me a home office for my expanding educational consulting business. I've rebuilt my credit, established savings, and recently qualified for a mortgage independently, a financial achievement once unimaginable. Clara has become family in every meaningful way. After that first night of sanctuary, our connection deepened beyond categorization. She visits weekly for Sunday dinners, reading stories to Ava and sharing wisdom from decades of helping women rebuild. I've worked with hundreds of survivors, Clara told me on Ava's 2nd birthday. But watching you and Ava thrive has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. At 81, Clara remains active, walking with a cane adorned with colorful ribbons Ava selected. She's the grandmother figure Ava deserves, offering love without criticism or control. Granny C knows everything. Ava often announces, presenting Clara with garden treasures or questions about the universe. My work helping others emerged from my healing. 2 years ago, I began volunteering at the shelter that assisted me, sharing my story as proof independence was possible. This evolved into facilitating a support group, mothering after manipulation, meeting weekly in a bright room with toys for children and resources for women. When I left, I didn't know anyone who'd started over with a baby. I told the shelter director when proposing the group, I want to be that example. The transformation from survivor to advocate has been healing. Each woman who finds strength reminds me of my journey. Each child who laughs freely echoes Ava's development. Last month, I launched an online resource connecting mothers with legal advocates, housing assistance, and employment opportunities. The website includes success stories and guides for navigating the first year of independence. My relationship with myself has seen profound healing. The voice echoing David's criticisms has been replaced with compassion and confidence. I no longer second-guess decisions or apologize for taking up space. Simple pleasures David criticized as frivolous have returned. I sing loudly while cooking, wear clothes for comfort, make decisions based on my values. My body, which carried Ava and the stress of abuse, has recovered strength. Yoga and hiking have replaced David's restrictive exercise regimen. The woman in the mirror meets my gaze with confidence, not searching for flaws Margaret would point out. Trust remains a work in progress. Dating isn't a priority, though friends suggest introductions. You're re-establishing your relationship with yourself first, my therapist observed. That's the foundation for any healthy future relationship. David has faded to the periphery. After losing custody, he maintained supervised visitation for 6 months before gradually canceling sessions. Child support payments arrive irregularly despite court orders. Last year, during a rare conversation about Ava's preschool enrollment, David said quietly, "I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was protecting my family." The statement fell short of an apology, but showed limited recognition. According to acquaintances, David remains tied to Margaret, who controls his personal life. They present themselves as victims of an unfair legal system. While I once craved validation from David, his acknowledgement no longer defines my reality. The truth is documented in court records, witnessed by bus strangers, and evident in Ava's emotional freedom. Margaret occasionally attempts contact through third parties, sending gifts that are returned unopened or claiming family medical history might impact Ava. These are addressed through legal channels. Ava has flourished beyond my hopes. At 3, she shows emotional intelligence and boundary setting many adults struggle with. When overwhelmed, she communicates clearly. When happy, her joy radiates. "No, thank you," she told a persistent playmate recently, setting boundaries with remarkable clarity. Watching her advocate for herself filled me with pride and reassurance that the cycle of control ends with us. The legacy of our experience manifests in conscious parenting. I encourage Ava's independence within safe boundaries, validate her emotions without judgment, and model healthy relationships and self-respect daily. My journey from that crowded bus has taught me lessons I hope to share. Love never requires diminishment of self. Control isn't protection. Isolation isn't intimacy. Criticism isn't guidance. Most importantly, breaking free requires courage and community. One stranger's intervention created the opening, but sustained support made recovery possible. Every woman deserves the opportunity to leave and the resources to rebuild. If you recognize your relationship in my story, know you're not alone. The first step toward freedom is hard, but a different life is possible. Trust the small voice saying you deserve better. It's telling the truth. For those who haven't experienced this, your awareness matters. Had the bus passengers looked away, had Clara remained silent, my story might have ended differently. Sometimes safety is one intervention away. Thank you for witnessing my journey from fear to freedom. The life you save might someday be your own.